The golden light of the setting sun fell across the dusty town square of Golden, Colorado, where Olivia Kendrick stood alone at the edge of the celebration, watching couples twirl and laugh in each other's arms while her heart ached with a loneliness she could barely name. It was June of 1878, and the whole town had gathered to celebrate the completion of the new church, a modest wooden structure that stood proudly at the north end of Main Street. Tables laden with food stretched along the boardwalk, and a fiddler played lively tunes that filled the warm evening air. Everyone seemed to have someone to dance with, someone to share their joy with, and Olivia felt the weight of her solitude pressing down on her shoulders like a heavy winter coat in summertime. She had arrived in Golden 3 months earlier, following the death of her aunt in Denver. At 22 years old, Olivia had inherited her aunt's small seamstress shop on the edge of town, along with the tiny apartment above it. She had thrown herself into the work, mending clothes and creating new dresses for the women of Golden, but the work could not fill the emptiness that had settled in her chest. She had no family left, no close friends in this still unfamiliar place, and watching the couples dance together now made her realize just how alone she truly was. A young couple spun past her, the woman's yellow dress flaring out as her partner guided her through the steps. Olivia recognized them as the banker's daughter and her new husband. They had been married just 2 weeks ago, and Olivia had sewn the wedding dress herself, spending long nights by lamplight to get every detail perfect. The bride had been so happy when she tried it on, tears streaming down her face as she looked at herself in the mirror. Olivia had felt proud of her work, but also a pang of something she did not want to name. She took a step back, intending to slip away to her quiet apartment where she could be alone with her melancholy thoughts. But before she could turn, a warm hand gently took hers. Startled, she looked up into a pair of steady blue eyes set in a sun-bronzed face beneath the brim of a well-worn cowboy hat. "Join them," the man said, his voice low and kind, gesturing toward the dancing couples with his free hand. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She recognized him as Caleb Sutton, the quiet cowboy who ran a small ranch about 5 miles outside of town. He came into Golden every few weeks for supplies, and she had seen him pass by her shop window more than once. He was tall and lean, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a face that might have been carved from the mountains themselves. She had never spoken more than a polite greeting to him before now. "I do not know how to dance," Olivia said quickly, trying to pull her hand back, but his grip remained gentle yet firm. "Neither do I, not really," Caleb admitted, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "But I have been watching you stand here alone for the past half hour, and it does not seem right. Everyone should be part of the celebration. You were watching me." The words came out before she could stop them, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was," he said simply, without embarrassment. "I have seen you in town before at your shop. You are always working, always alone. I thought perhaps tonight you might want some company." Olivia felt something shift in her chest, a small crack in the wall she had built around her heart. Before she could talk herself out of it, she nodded. Caleb's smile widened just a fraction, and he led her toward the other dancers. The fiddler launched into a new tune, something slower and sweeter than before. Caleb placed one hand carefully at her waist and kept her other hand in his. Olivia rested her free hand on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt. They began to move, and while neither of them executed the steps with any particular grace, there was something comfortable in their awkwardness. They were learning together, finding their rhythm as the music swirled around them. "You came here from Denver?" Caleb asked after a moment, his voice quiet enough that only she could hear. "Yes, 3 months ago. My aunt passed away and left me her shop." Olivia found herself meeting his eyes, surprised by the genuine interest she saw there. "Have you always lived in Golden?" "Born and raised on the ranch. My father started it when he first came west, back in '58. He died 2 years ago, left the place to me." There was a flicker of old grief in his eyes, something Olivia recognized because she carried the same weight herself. "I am sorry," she said softly. "Thank you. It gets easier with time, or so they say. I am still waiting for that part." He guided her through a turn, and she felt her skirts swish around her legs. "Your aunt, were you close to her?" "She was the only family I had left. My parents died when I was 17. Fever took them both within a week of each other. Aunt Margaret took me in, taught me the seamstress trade. She was kind to me." Olivia felt the familiar sting of tears but blinked them back. "I miss her." "That is a lot of loss for one person to carry," Caleb said, and the understanding in his voice made something inside Olivia loosen just a little. They danced in comfortable silence for a while, the music washing over them as the sun continued its descent toward the mountains. Other dancers moved around them, but Olivia found herself barely noticing anyone except the man holding her. There was something solid about him, something steady and real that made her feel less adrift than she had in months. When the song ended, Caleb did not immediately release her. Instead, he looked down at her with those clear blue eyes and said, "Would you like to get something to eat? I hear Mrs. Patterson brought her famous apple pie." Olivia found herself smiling, truly smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. "I would like that very much." They made their way to the food tables, and Caleb loaded 2 plates with generous portions of pie, along with some cold chicken and fresh bread. They found a spot on a bench near the edge of the square, away from the main crowd but still part of the festivities. As they ate, they talked. Caleb told her about the ranch, about the cattle he raised and the horses he trained. He spoke about the land with a reverence that touched something deep in Olivia's heart, describing the way the morning light hit the mountains and how the meadows turned gold with wildflowers in the summer. Olivia found herself talking more than she had in months, telling him about her work, about the satisfaction she found in creating something beautiful from simple fabric and thread. She told him about Denver, about the busy streets and the noise that never seemed to stop, and how she had been surprised by how much she appreciated the quieter pace of Golden. "You miss the city?" Caleb asked, watching her face carefully. Olivia considered the question. "Sometimes I miss having more people around, but I do not miss the loneliness. I think you can be lonelier in a crowd of strangers than you can be in a small town where everyone knows your name, even if you do not know them yet." There was a gentle teasing in his voice. "Even then," she agreed. "Though I am slowly learning. Mrs. Patterson has been kind to me, and the shopkeeper always asks after my health. Golden is a good town, full of good people. They just need time to get to know you, and you need time to get to know them." Caleb set his empty plate aside and turned to face her more fully. "I would like to help with that if you would let me." Olivia's heart beat faster. "What do you mean?" "I mean I would like to call on you properly. Take you to the church social next month, maybe show you some of the pretty spots around the valley, if that would be agreeable to you." The directness of his words caught her off guard, but in a pleasant way. There was no game playing here, no false pretense. Just an honest man making his intentions clear. Olivia thought about her lonely apartment, about the long evenings spent by herself with only her needle and thread for company. She thought about how it felt to dance with Caleb, how his presence had made her feel less alone for the first time since she arrived in Golden. "Yes," she said, meeting his eyes. "That would be very agreeable." The smile that spread across Caleb's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Good, he said simply. That is very good. They stayed at the celebration until the stars came out, talking and occasionally dancing when the music called to them. When Caleb finally walked her back to her shop, the moon was high and bright overhead, casting silver shadows across the dusty street. At her door, he took off his hat and held it in his hands, suddenly looking almost shy. "Thank you for this evening," Olivia said, fumbling with her key. "I had a wonderful time." "So did I," Caleb replied. "May I come by on Sunday? After church, perhaps we could take a ride out to the ranch. I would like to show you the place." "I would love that." Olivia unlocked her door but paused before going inside. "Caleb, why did you ask me to dance tonight? There were other women there, women you have known all your life." Caleb was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "Because when I looked at you standing there, watching everyone else be happy, I saw something I recognized. Someone who felt on the outside looking in. I know what that feels like, even in the town where I was born. Since my father died, I have been so busy keeping the ranch running that I have not made time for much else. I looked up tonight and realized I was just as alone as you looked, so I suppose I asked you to dance for both of us." The honesty of his words made Olivia's throat tight. "I am glad you did," she whispered. "So am I. Good night, Olivia." "Good night, Caleb." She watched him walk away, his tall frame moving easily down the street until he reached the livery stable where he had left his horse. Only when he disappeared from view did she finally go inside, climbing the stairs to her apartment with a lightness in her step that had not been there in a very long time. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Olivia found herself unable to sleep. Her mind kept replaying the evening, the feel of Caleb's hand in hers, the sound of his voice, the way his eyes had seemed to truly see her. She had been so focused on her grief and her loneliness that she had almost forgotten what hope felt like. But now, in the darkness of her room, she felt a small flame of it kindling in her chest. Sunday dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for a ride into the countryside. Olivia dressed carefully in her best day dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her dark hair up neatly and even allowed herself a touch of rose water at her wrists. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw a hint of color in her cheeks that had nothing to do with cosmetics. Church service seemed to drag on forever, though Reverend Matthews gave a fine sermon about community and caring for one another. Olivia found her attention wandering more than once, her eyes searching the congregation until they found Caleb sitting near the back, his hat resting on the pew beside him. Once, their gazes met, and he gave her a small, private smile that made her heart flutter. After the service ended, Olivia made her way through the crowd gathered outside the church. Mrs. Patterson stopped her to compliment her dress, and she had to politely extract herself from a conversation with the postmaster's wife about an order of new curtains. Finally, she spotted Caleb waiting by a well-maintained wagon hitched to two sturdy horses. "I thought the wagon would be more comfortable than riding," he explained as he helped her up onto the seat. "The ranch is not too far, but far enough that you might appreciate not being on horseback if you are not used to riding." "That was very thoughtful," Olivia said, settling her skirts around her. In truth, she had not been on a horse since she was a girl, and the idea of the wagon was much more appealing. Caleb climbed up beside her and took the reins, guiding the horses down Main Street and out of town. The road curved through rolling hills dotted with ponderosa pines and scrub oak. Wildflowers bloomed in patches of purple and yellow, and the air smelled of sage and sun-warmed earth. Olivia breathed deeply, feeling something in her chest expand with the open space around her. "This is beautiful," she said, looking out at the landscape. In the distance, The Rocky Mountains rose up against the blue sky, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer season. "Wait until you see the ranch," Caleb said, pride evident in his voice. "We have a creek that runs right through the property, and there is a meadow that my mother used to love. She would pack lunch and we would spend whole afternoons there when I was a boy." "Your mother is she. She died when I was 15. Pneumonia took her one winter. It was just my father and me after that." Caleb's hands were steady on the reins, but Olivia could hear the old pain in his voice. "He never remarried. I think he loved her too much to even consider it." "That must have been beautiful in its way to see that kind of love." "It was. It also set a high standard." Caleb glanced at her. "My father told me once that I should never settle for anything less than what he had with my mother, that it was better to be alone than to be with someone who did not make your heart glad." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the wagon wheels crunching over the dirt road. Olivia found herself acutely aware of Caleb beside her, the way his strong hands held the reins, the breadth of his shoulders beneath his Sunday shirt. She wondered what he saw when he looked at her, if he felt even a fraction of the pull she was beginning to feel toward him. The ranch came into view as they crested a hill. It was not a grand spread, but it was well kept and clearly tended with care. A neat two-story house sat in a clearing, its white paint bright in the afternoon sun. A barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, all in good repair. Fences marked out pastures where cattle grazed peacefully, and Olivia could hear the sound of running water from somewhere close by. "Welcome to the Sutton Ranch," Caleb said, bringing the wagon to a stop in front of the house. He jumped down and came around to help her, his hands warm and sure at her waist as he lifted her to the ground. "It is lovely," Olivia said honestly, looking around with genuine appreciation. "You have kept it beautifully. I try. It is a lot of work for one man, but I have a couple of hands who help out, especially during roundup season." He gestured toward the house. "Would you like to see inside?" The house was as neat inside as it was outside, though it had the unmistakable air of a place where a man lived alone. The furniture was simple but well made, and there were touches here and there that spoke of a woman's hand from long ago. Lace curtains in the windows, now faded with age. A quilt on the back of the sofa, its colors still bright. A few small paintings on the walls, landscapes of the mountains and valleys. "My mother made the quilt," Caleb said, following her gaze. "And she painted those pictures. She had a talent for it. They are beautiful." Olivia moved closer to examine one of the paintings, a sunset scene with mountains in the background. She captured the light perfectly. They spent the afternoon exploring the ranch. Caleb showed her the barn where he kept his best horses, introducing her to a gentle mare named Daisy who nuzzled Olivia's hand looking for treats. They walked down to the creek, where the water ran clear and cold over smooth stones. The meadow Caleb had mentioned was in full bloom, a carpet of wildflowers stretching out beneath the wide sky. They sat in the meadow for a long while, Olivia with her skirts spread around her, and Caleb stretched out on his side, propped up on one elbow. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their childhoods, their hopes for the future, their thoughts on life in the West. Olivia learned that Caleb had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. Caleb discovered that Olivia had a sharp mind and opinions she was not afraid to share. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" Olivia asked at one point, plucking a flower and twirling it between her fingers. "Sometimes," Caleb admitted, "especially in the evenings. The days are so full of work that I do not have time to think about it, but when the sun goes down and I am sitting in that empty house, I feel it. I think that is part of why I have been coming into town more often lately." "Oh, and here I thought it was just for supplies." He met her eyes directly. It was. Until about 2 months ago when I saw you through the window of your shop, working at your sewing machine with this look of intense concentration on your face. You looked so focused, so passionate about what you were doing. I found myself thinking about you after that, wondering what your story was, why you were alone. Olivia's breath caught. 2 months ago, but you only spoke to me last night. I know. I was working up the courage. He sat up, brushing grass from his shirt. I am not good at this sort of thing, Olivia. I spent most of my life on this ranch with my father, and since he died, I have been even more isolated. I do not have smooth words or fancy manners, but I know what I feel, and I feel something when I look at you. Something that makes me want to try, even if I am clumsy at it. The raw honesty in his words made Olivia's heart pound. She had grown up reading romantic novels, dreaming of flowery speeches and grand gestures. But sitting here in this meadow with this earnest, genuine man, she realized that this was better than any novel. This was real. I feel it too, she said quietly. I have been so focused on my grief and my loneliness that I had almost convinced myself I would never feel anything else. But then you took my hand last night and something shifted. I feel less alone when I am with you. Caleb reached out and took her hand, the same way he had at the dance. Then let us be less alone together, he said. I do not know where this will lead, but I would like to find out. If you would too. Yes, Olivia said, squeezing his hand. I would like that very much. The sun was beginning to set by the time they made their way back to the wagon. Caleb insisted on packing a basket of food from his pantry for her, including fresh eggs from his chickens and some smoked meat from his last hunting trip. As they drove back toward Golden, the sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink, painting the mountains in colors that seemed almost unreal. At her door, Caleb helped her down from the wagon and carried her basket up the stairs. At the top, he set it down and turned to face her, his hat in his hands once again. May I see you again soon? He asked. Perhaps you could come to dinner later this week. I am not much of a cook, but I can manage a decent stew. I would enjoy that, Olivia said, and I could bring fresh bread from the bakery. That sounds perfect. He hesitated, then leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. Good night, Olivia. Good night, Caleb. She watched him go again, and this time when she went inside, she found herself humming one of the tunes from the dance. Her apartment, which had felt so empty and cold before, now seemed warm and welcoming. She unpacked the basket Caleb had given her, arranging the eggs carefully in her small cupboard and wrapping the meat in a clean cloth. Each item felt like a promise, a connection to the man who had given them to her. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness that Olivia had never experienced before. Caleb came to town twice a week, always finding an excuse to stop by her shop. Sometimes he brought her wildflowers from the meadow. Once, he brought her a beautiful piece of leather that he thought she might use for a project. She made him a new shirt, secretly measuring one of his old ones to get the size right, and the look on his face when she gave it to him made all the hours of careful stitching worth it. They had dinner at the ranch several times, and Olivia found herself growing to love the place almost as much as Caleb did. She would help him with small tasks around the house, mending his curtains and organizing his cupboards, and he showed her how to handle the horses and identify the different plants that grew on his land. They fell into an easy rhythm with each other, a comfortable partnership that felt as natural as breathing. The town began to notice their growing attachment. Mrs. Patterson made a point of telling Olivia how pleased she was to see her settling in and finding companionship. The shopkeeper gave Caleb a knowing wink when he came in to buy ribbon that everyone knew was not for him. At church, The older women smiled approvingly when Caleb sat with Olivia in her pew, but it was not all smooth sailing. One evening in late July, Olivia was closing up her shop when a stranger walked in. He was tall and well-dressed, with slicked back hair and an air of city sophistication that immediately set her on edge. "Miss Kendrick," he asked, removing his hat with a flourish. "I am looking for the proprietor of this establishment." "I am she," Olivia said carefully, keeping the cutting table between them. "How may I help you? My name is Richard Vance. I am a lawyer from Denver, handling the estate of Margaret Kendrick." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a document. "I am afraid I have some unfortunate news regarding your aunt's affairs." Olivia's stomach dropped. "What sort of news?" "It seems that your aunt had accumulated some significant debts before her death, medical expenses primarily. The creditors have been patient, but they are now demanding payment. I am afraid the shop and the building it occupies may need to be sold to settle the accounts." "But my aunt left the shop to me. There was a will." "Indeed there was, and the shop is legally yours. However, the debts are also yours as the sole inheritor of her estate. You can either pay them off, which I calculate to be around $800, or you can agree to sell the property and use the proceeds to settle the accounts." He laid the document on the cutting table. "I apologize for bringing such distressing news, but these matters must be addressed. $800. It might as well have been 8,000. Olivia had been saving every penny she could, but after just a few months of operation, she had barely $100 put away. There was no way she could raise that kind of money, not quickly enough to satisfy creditors. "How long do I have?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The creditors have agreed to wait 60 days from today. After that, they will begin proceedings to claim the property." Richard Vance put his hat back on. "I am sorry, Miss Kendrick. I know this is not what you wanted to hear. If you need any assistance with the sale, my firm would be happy to help arrange matters." After he left, Olivia locked the door and sank into her chair, her mind reeling. She could lose everything. The shop, the apartment, the life she had just begun to build here in Golden. She would have nowhere to go, no way to support herself. The thought of leaving, of losing not just her home but also her growing connection with Caleb, made her feel physically ill. She did not tell Caleb right away. She spent the next few days trying to think of solutions, lying awake at night running numbers in her head that never added up right. She took on extra work, staying up late to finish rush orders, but even working around the clock, she could not earn money fast enough. Finally, a week after the lawyer's visit, Caleb noticed something was wrong. They were at the ranch, ostensibly having dinner, but Olivia had barely touched her food. She had been quiet all evening, distracted and distant in a way that was completely unlike her usual self. "Something is wrong," Caleb said finally, setting down his fork. "You have barely said 2 words all evening. Please, Olivia, talk to me. Whatever it is, we can face it together." The kindness in his voice broke something open inside her, and suddenly the whole story came pouring out. The lawyer, the debts, the 60 days to come up with money she did not have. When she finished, there were tears streaming down her face. "I am going to lose everything," she said, her voice breaking. "And just when I was starting to feel like I had found a home here, found something real with you. I am so sorry, Caleb. I should have told you sooner, but I kept hoping I could figure out a solution on my own." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, and when Olivia finally dared to look at him, she was surprised to see determination in his eyes rather than pity or disappointment. $800, he said slowly. "That is a lot of money. I know. It is impossible. I have been trying to think of every possible option, but there is no way I can earn that much in 60 days. What if you did not have to earn it?" Caleb stood up and began pacing. What if someone lent it to you? Caleb, no. I could not ask you to do that. I have no idea how long it would take me to pay you back. You did not ask. I am offering. He stopped pacing and looked at her directly. Olivia, I have some money saved. My father was careful with his finances, and I have been just as careful. I could lend you the money to settle the debts. That is your security, your safety net. I could not possibly accept. Why not? What good is money if I cannot use it to help someone I care about? He moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. Listen to me. I do not want you to leave Golden. I do not want you to lose your shop or your home. And I am not offering this lightly or without thought. I know what I am doing, and I am doing it because I care about you. Because in these past weeks, you have become important to me, more important than money. Olivia looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity there. Caleb, I cannot let you risk your future for me. You are not risking my future. You are part of my future if you will have me. He squeezed her hands gently. Please, let me do this. Not as a grand gesture or because I think you are helpless, but because people who care about each other help each other. That is what I believe. That is what my parents taught me. The tears came harder now, but they were different tears. Not tears of despair, but tears of gratitude and something deeper, something that felt dangerously close to love. I will pay you back, she said firmly. Every penny with interest. I do not know how long it will take, but I promise you I will. We can work out the details later. Right now, let us just focus on solving the immediate problem. Caleb stood and helped her to her feet, pulling her into an embrace. Olivia let herself lean against him, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for seeing me, for caring, for being exactly who you are. You do not need to thank me, he said softly. This is what you do when you love someone. The word hung in the air between them. Love. Neither of them had said it before, though Olivia suspected they had both felt it. Now it was out in the open, real and undeniable. She pulled back just enough to look up at him. Do you? She asked. Love me? Yes, Caleb said without hesitation. I love you, Olivia. I think I have been falling in love with you since the moment I saw you standing alone at that dance, looking like you had lost your last friend in the world. I wanted to be your friend, and then I wanted to be more than your friend, and now I cannot imagine my life without you in it. I love you too, Olivia said, the words feeling right and true. I did not think I could feel this way again, not after losing everyone I cared about, but you made me believe in hope again. You made me believe in happiness. Caleb cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, a gentle, reverent kiss that spoke of promises and possibilities. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. The next day, Caleb went to the bank in Golden and withdrew $800 in cash. He presented it to Olivia at her shop, along with a simple contract he had drawn up outlining the loan terms. Olivia insisted on including interest and a payment schedule, even though Caleb protested that it was not necessary. It is necessary to me, she said firmly. This is a business arrangement as well as a personal one, and I want to do this properly. You are giving me a tremendous gift, but I need to maintain my independence and my pride. I understand, Caleb said, and the respect in his eyes made Olivia's heart swell. They went together to meet with Richard Vance and settle the debts. The lawyer seemed surprised to see Olivia with the full amount in cash, but he processed the payments efficiently, providing her with receipts and legal documents showing that all of her aunt's debts were satisfied in full. When they left his office, Olivia felt like she could breathe properly for the first time in weeks. I feel like celebrating, Caleb said as they walked down the Denver street. What do you say we have dinner at a proper restaurant before we head back to Golden? They found a nice establishment and enjoyed a leisurely meal, toasting with glasses of wine to new beginnings and second chances. On the ride back to Golden, Olivia found herself thinking about the future in a way she had not allowed herself to before. She thought about the shop, about building her business and her reputation as a skilled seamstress. But she also thought about Caleb, about the life they might build together. As summer turned to fall, their relationship deepened. Caleb taught Olivia to ride horseback, and she grew confident enough to make the journey to the ranch on her own, riding the gentle mare Daisy. Olivia brought warmth and life to Caleb's home, cooking meals in his kitchen and helping him plan improvements to the property. They talked about everything under the sun, and even their silences were comfortable. In September, Caleb asked Olivia to come to the ranch for Sunday dinner. When she arrived, she found the table set with his mother's good china and wildflowers arranged in a vase at the center. Caleb was more nervous than she had ever seen him, fumbling with the serving spoons and nearly dropping the bowl of potatoes. "Caleb, what is going on?" she asked, half amused and half concerned. "You are acting very strange." "I have something I need to say," he said, setting down the bowl carefully. "Or rather, something I need to ask." He came around the table and took both of her hands, and suddenly, Olivia's heart was racing because she knew what was coming. "Olivia Kendrick, I have been thinking about this for weeks now, trying to find the right words, but I realized that the simplest words are often the truest ones." He took a deep breath. "I love you. I love your strength and your kindness. I love the way you laugh at my jokes and the way you hum when you are working. I love how you made me believe that I did not have to be alone anymore. You have brought light and joy into my life, and I cannot imagine going back to the way things were before I knew you. I want to build a life with you, here on this ranch in this valley. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to face whatever comes together as partners, as husband and wife. Olivia, will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down Olivia's face, but she was smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Caleb, I will marry you. I love you so much, and I want all of those things too. I want to build a life with you." Caleb let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he finally set her down, he pulled a ring from his pocket. It was a simple gold band with a small diamond, elegant in its modesty. "It was my mother's," he said, suddenly shy again. "My father gave it to me before he died and told me to give it to the woman I wanted to spend my life with. I would be honored if you would wear it." "It is beautiful," Olivia breathed as he slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. "I will treasure it always." They were married 6 weeks later, on a crisp October day when the aspens had turned gold and the air smelled of autumn. The whole town turned out for the wedding, filling the little church to capacity. Olivia wore a dress she had made herself, ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Mrs. Patterson cried through the entire ceremony, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. The shopkeeper gave Caleb a hearty slap on the back afterward, declaring him the luckiest man in Colorado. They held the reception in the same town square where they had first danced together, and it seemed fitting to Olivia that they should celebrate the beginning of their marriage in the place where their story had truly started. As the sun set and the fiddler played, Caleb took her hand and led her to the center of the space, just as he had done months before. "Join them," he whispered, echoing his words from that first night, and Olivia laughed as they began to dance. But this time they were not awkward or uncertain. They moved together smoothly, naturally, two people who had learned each other's rhythms and could anticipate each other's steps. As they danced, Olivia looked up at her husband and felt her heart overflow with happiness. She had been so alone, so lost, and now she was found. She had a home, a husband, a future full of promise. After the reception, they drove out to the ranch together in Caleb's wagon, now decorated with ribbons and tin cans tied to the back by some of the younger town boys. The house was warm and welcoming, and Caleb had prepared the bedroom with fresh linens and more wildflowers. That night, they came together as husband and wife, their love tender and fierce and full of wonder. Olivia moved into the ranch permanently, though she kept her shop in town. 3 days a week, she would ride Daisy into Golden and spend the day working on orders and meeting with customers. The other days, she worked from home, setting up a sewing room in one of the spare bedrooms. She and Caleb fell into an easy rhythm, working together to run both the ranch and the seamstress business. As the months passed, Olivia found herself happier than she had ever imagined possible. She loved her work, but she also loved the life she had built with Caleb. She loved waking up beside him, loved the way he kissed her goodbye each morning before heading out to work with the cattle. She loved cooking dinner together in the evenings, loved sitting on the porch as the sun set and talking about their days. In the spring, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Caleb, wanting to be sure. When she finally shared the news, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time. "We are going to be parents," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "A baby, we are going to have a baby." "We are," Olivia confirmed, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "In late autumn, the doctor thinks. October or November." Caleb immediately became protective and attentive, insisting that she not overwork herself and checking on her constantly. Olivia found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating, having to remind him that pregnancy was not an illness, and she was perfectly capable of continuing her normal activities. As summer arrived and her belly began to swell, Olivia scaled back her hours at the shop in town. She hired a young woman named Sarah to help with the simpler alterations and mending, keeping the more complex projects for herself. The women of Golden were delighted by the news of the coming baby, and Olivia found herself showered with gifts and advice, some wanted and some less so. In October, as the leaves turned gold once again and the air grew crisp, Olivia felt the first pains of labor. Caleb rode into town at breakneck speed to fetch the doctor and Mrs. Patterson, who had experience as a midwife. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Caleb, pacing anxiously downstairs, feared for both his wife and child. But when the sun rose on October 15th, 1879, Olivia delivered a healthy baby boy. Caleb was allowed into the room to meet his son, and the look on his face when he held the tiny bundle for the first time made everything Olivia had just endured worth it. "He is perfect," Caleb whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Olivia, he is absolutely perfect." They named him James, after Caleb's father, with the middle name of Thomas for Olivia's father. Baby James had his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, and from the moment he entered the world, he had both of his parents wrapped completely around his tiny fingers. The first year of parenthood was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Olivia threw herself into motherhood with the same dedication she brought to everything else, while Caleb proved to be a devoted and hands-on father. They took turns walking the floor with James when he cried at night. They marveled over every milestone, from his first smile to his first tooth to his first word, which was predictably "da." As James grew from a baby into a toddler, Olivia slowly returned to her work at the shop, now bringing James with her. The women of Golden loved having a baby to coo over, and James proved to be a surprisingly content child, happy to play with wooden blocks on the floor while his mother worked. When James was 2 years old, Olivia became pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy seemed to go more smoothly. In June of 1882, she gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, after Caleb's mother. Beth, as they called her, was a tiny thing with her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn chin. From the beginning, she was more demanding than James had been, crying louder and wanting more attention. "She knows what she wants and is not afraid to ask for it," Olivia said with a laugh as she nursed her daughter. "She is going to be a force to be reckoned with." "Just like her mother," Caleb said fondly, pressing a kiss to Olivia's temple. Life settled into a busy but contented rhythm. The ranch prospered under Caleb's careful management, and Olivia's seamstress business became one of the most respected in the area, with customers coming from as far as Denver for her work. They added onto the house, building more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. They hired a hand to help Caleb with the ranch work, freeing him to spend more time with his growing family. The years passed in a blur of birthday parties and Christmas celebrations, of school plays and church socials. James grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved working alongside his father on the ranch. Beth was as spirited as they had predicted, always into something, always asking questions, always testing boundaries. When James was 8 and Beth was 6, Olivia found herself pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, and the doctor warned her that she was not as young as she had been and needed to take it easy. Caleb hired additional help for both the ranch and the shop, insisting that Olivia rest as much as possible. In February of 1888, Olivia gave birth to another son. But this time, there were complications. The baby was small and struggled to breathe properly. For 3 terrifying days, they were not sure if he would survive. Caleb barely left Olivia's side, and they prayed together constantly, begging God to spare their child. On the 4th day, the baby turned a corner. His breathing strengthened, and he began to nurse properly. The doctor declared him out of danger, though he warned that the boy might always be a bit more delicate than other children. They named him Daniel, and from the beginning, he proved to have a sweet, gentle nature that endeared him to everyone. He was smaller than James had been at the same age, but he was also brighter, more observant, always watching everything with his wide green eyes. Olivia was told by the doctor that another pregnancy would be dangerous for her, and while it saddened her a bit to know that Daniel would be their last child, she also felt grateful for the 3 healthy children she had been blessed with. She and Caleb agreed that their family was complete, and they threw all their love and energy into raising their children well. The years continued to pass. James grew into a young man who was the image of his father, tall and strong with the same steady, reliable nature. At 16, he announced his intention to stay on the ranch and work with his father, and Caleb beamed with pride. Beth, at 14, declared her intention to become a teacher, much to everyone's surprise. She had always been more interested in adventure than academics, but she had also developed a passion for helping others learn. Daniel, at 8 years old, showed an unexpected talent for drawing. He would spend hours sketching the animals on the ranch, the mountains in the distance, his family going about their daily activities. Olivia recognized the same artistic gift that Caleb's mother had possessed, and she encouraged it whenever possible, buying him paper and pencils and praising his work. In the summer of 1896, the town of Golden celebrated its 40th anniversary. There was a grand celebration planned, with speeches and dancing and a feast that would put all previous celebrations to shame. Olivia and Caleb, now respected pillars of the community, were asked to share their story as an example of how people could come to Golden and build a life. Standing on the platform in the town square, Olivia looked out at the gathered crowd and felt overwhelmed with emotion. She saw their children sitting in the front row, James now 18 and looking so much like his father, it made her heart ache. Beth, 16 and beautiful, was already catching the eyes of several young men in town. And Daniel, 10 years old and still small for his age, sat between his siblings, his sketchbook on his lap as always. Behind them were the people of Golden, many of whom had become dear friends over the years. Mrs. Patterson, now elderly but still sharp as a tack, the shopkeeper who had given James his first job, the families who had welcomed Olivia into their community when she had been lost and alone. Caleb squeezed her hand and she looked up at him. He was 41 now, with silver beginning to show at his temples and laugh lines around his eyes. But to her, he was still the man who had taken her hand at a dance and asked her to join in, who had seen her loneliness and had offered her not just companionship but love. "Tell them," he said softly. "Tell them our story." So Olivia did. She told them about arriving in Golden, alone and grieving, convinced that she would always be on the outside looking in. She told them about the night of the church celebration, how she had stood at the edge watching couples dance, feeling like happiness was something that happened to other people but never to her. "And then this man," she said, pulling Caleb forward, "this quiet, kind cowboy took my hand and said 2 simple words that changed my life. He said, 'Join them.' And I did. I joined the dance and I joined the community and I joined my life with his, and every day since then has been a gift." She talked about the challenges they had faced, the debt that had threatened to destroy her new life, and how Caleb had offered help without judgment or expectation. She spoke about learning to accept love, learning to trust again after loss, learning that home was not just a place but a person you chose to walk beside through life. "Golden gave me a second chance," she concluded, her voice thick with emotion. "This town, these people, and most especially this man standing beside me. So when we celebrate Golden today, I am not just celebrating a town. I am celebrating the place where I learned that it is never too late to find love, never too late to find home, never too late to join the dance." The crowd erupted in applause, and Olivia saw tears on many faces. Caleb pulled her into his arms, kissing her in front of the entire town, and their children cheered along with everyone else. That night, after the celebration had ended and their children were tucked in bed, Caleb and Olivia sat on their porch, watching the stars come out over the mountains. It had become their favorite ritual over the years, this quiet time together at the end of the day. "Do you remember what I was thinking that night at the first dance?" Caleb asked, his arm around her shoulders. "When I first saw you standing there." "Tell me," Olivia said, settling more comfortably against him. "I was thinking that you looked like someone who had forgotten how to hope. And I thought that if I could just get you to take my hand, maybe I could remind you." He paused, pressing a kiss to her hair. "What I did not know then was that you would remind me too. I had become so focused on just surviving, just keeping the ranch going, that I had forgotten what it felt like to truly live. You taught me that." "We taught each other," Olivia corrected. "That is what love does. It makes us better than we were alone." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. In the distance, cattle lowed softly. Closer by, the horses shifted in their stalls. Inside the house, their children slept safely, dreaming whatever dreams children dream. "Are you happy?" Caleb asked after a while. "Truly happy?" Olivia considered the question seriously. She thought about her life, about the journey that had brought her here, the losses she had endured, the grief she had carried, the loneliness that had once seemed like it would swallow her whole. But she also thought about everything she had gained: the love of a good man, 3 beautiful children, a home that was truly hers, a community that had embraced her, work that fulfilled her, purpose and meaning and joy. "Yes," she said simply, "I am truly happy, more than I ever dreamed I could be." "Good," Caleb said, satisfaction in his voice. "That is all I have ever wanted, your happiness." "And yours," Olivia reminded him. "Are you happy?" "More than I have words to express. You gave me everything I did not even know I needed: a partner, a family, a reason to look forward to tomorrow." He tightened his arm around her. "I love you, Olivia, as much today as I did the day I married you. More even, because now I know all the ways a life can be shared, all the joys and challenges we can face together." "I love you too," Olivia whispered. "Thank you for taking my hand that night. Thank you for asking me to join them." "Best decision I ever made," Caleb said with a smile in his voice. As the years continued to unfold, their life together only deepened and sweetened. James eventually married a sweet girl from town named Anna, and they built a house on the ranch property so James could continue working with his father. Beth went to Teachers College in Denver and returned to teach at the Golden Schoolhouse, eventually falling in love with a young doctor who opened a practice in town. Daniel, despite his delicate health as a baby, grew into a talented artist whose paintings began to sell in Denver and beyond. Olivia and Caleb became grandparents, delighting in the children their children brought into the world. They watched their grandchildren grow up on the same land where their own children had played, and they took pleasure in passing on family stories and traditions. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a surprise celebration. The house was filled with family and friends, the table groaned under the weight of food, and there was music and laughter and love in abundance. In a quiet moment, Olivia and Caleb slipped away to their bedroom, needing a moment alone together. 25 years, Olivia said wonderingly, looking at herself in the mirror. She was 47 now, with silver streaking her dark hair and lines around her eyes. But when Caleb came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, she still felt like the young woman who had taken his hand at a dance all those years ago. "Best 25 years of my life," Caleb said, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "Though I hope we have at least 25 more ahead of us." "At least," Olivia agreed, turning in his arms to face him. "I want to grow old with you, Caleb. I want to sit on our porch when we are ancient and gray and watch our great-grandchildren play in the meadow." "That sounds like a perfect plan," Caleb said, and kissed her. They returned to the party, where their children had organized toasts and speeches. James spoke about growing up watching his parents' partnership, how they had shown him what a good marriage looked like. Beth talked about her mother's strength and her father's kindness, and how those qualities had shaped who she had become. Daniel presented them with a painting he had done of their wedding day, working from the descriptions they had given him and his own imagination. In the painting, Caleb and Olivia were dancing in the town square, surrounded by their community, joy evident on their faces. "It is how I always picture you," Daniel explained. "Dancing together in step with each other exactly where you belong." Olivia cried when she saw it, and Caleb's eyes were suspiciously bright as well. They hung the painting in a place of honor in their parlor, where they could see it every day. As they moved into their later years, Caleb and Olivia began to slow down just a bit. Caleb handed over more of the ranch responsibilities to James, though he still rode out each day to check on things. Olivia finally closed her shop in town, content to take on just a few special projects from home. They spent more time together, taking leisurely rides through the valley, sitting on the porch in the evenings, traveling to Denver occasionally to see Daniel's art shows. On their 30th anniversary, they returned to the town square where they had first met. It was summer again, and the town was having another celebration. Olivia stood at the edge, watching couples dance, and felt the memories wash over her. 30 years ago, she had stood in almost this exact spot, alone and certain that happiness was not meant for her. Then a warm hand took hers and she looked up into Caleb's beloved face. "Join them," he said with a smile, echoing those first words he had ever spoken to her. Olivia laughed, the sound young and bright despite the years that had passed. "I thought you would never ask." They moved onto the dance floor together, and despite the silver in their hair and the years on their bodies, they moved together as smoothly as ever. Around them, their children and grandchildren danced as well, a testament to the love that had started with two lonely people taking a chance on each other. As the music played and the sun set over the mountains, Olivia looked up at her husband and felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the cowboy who had seen her loneliness and had offered her his hand. Gratitude for the community that had welcomed her. Gratitude for the love that had sustained her through joy and sorrow, through challenges and triumphs. "Thank you," she whispered, knowing Caleb would understand all the things she was thanking him for. "No," Caleb said, pulling her closer. "Thank you. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy. Thank you for building this life with me." They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by the family they had created and the community they had helped build. And when they finally headed home to their ranch, driving through the familiar landscape in comfortable silence, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had been watching couples from a distance until the cowboy took her hand and said, "Join them." And in joining them, she had found everything she had never dared to hope for. Love, home, family, purpose, and a happiness that grew deeper with each passing year. Years continued to pass in Golden, and the Sutton family became a fixture of the community. When Caleb turned 60, the town honored him for his years of service, noting how he had always been ready to help a neighbor in need, whether it meant lending a hand during harvest or offering advice to younger ranchers. Olivia, at 57, was equally respected for her kindness and her skill, having taught several young women the seamstress trade over the years. Their grandchildren grew, and new great-grandchildren arrived. The ranch house was constantly filled with the sounds of family, multiple generations gathering for Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations. Olivia would look around the table at these gatherings, at all the faces young and old, and marvel at how one decision to take a cowboy's hand had led to all of this. Not that their life had been without challenges. They weathered droughts that tested the ranch's resources. They survived harsh winters that took some of the herd. They said goodbye to friends as the years took their toll. Mrs. Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep at 87, and Olivia wept at her funeral, remembering the older woman's kindness to a lonely newcomer so many years ago. But through every trial, Olivia and Caleb faced it together. Their love, which had started with such a simple gesture on a summer evening, had grown into something deep and unshakable. They knew each other's rhythms and moods, could communicate with a glance, finished each other's sentences. They had long since stopped being two separate people and had become a true partnership, stronger together than either could have been alone. On a crisp October morning in 1904, Olivia woke to find Caleb already up, sitting on the edge of their bed and looking out the window at the sunrise. She reached out and touched his shoulder, and he turned to smile at her. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice still rough with sleep. "I was thinking about how lucky I am," Caleb said, taking her hand. I was thinking about that scared young man who almost did not ask you to dance because he was afraid of being rejected. What if I had let fear win? What if I had just gone home that night without talking to you? But you did not, Olivia said, sitting up and leaning against him. You were brave, and it changed both of our lives. The best kind of bravery, Caleb agreed. The kind that leads to 26 years of marriage and counting. 26 years, Olivia echoed. It feels like both forever and no time at all. They sat together in companionable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. This had become their favorite time of day, these quiet morning moments before the business of the day began. It was in these moments that they felt most connected, most aware of the profound gift they had been given in finding each other. Later that day, the family gathered to celebrate Daniel's 26th birthday. He arrived from Denver with his new wife, Margaret, a fellow artist he had met at a gallery showing. The house filled with laughter and conversation, with grandchildren running through the rooms and the smell of Olivia's cooking filling the air. After dinner, as the family gathered in the parlor, James asked his parents to tell the story of how they met. It was a request that came up often, especially when new people married into the family. I was standing alone, Olivia began, as she always did, watching couples dance and feeling like I was on the outside of life, looking in through a window at happiness I would never have. And I was working up the courage to do something I had never done before, Caleb continued. Talk to a beautiful woman I did not know. They told the story together, trading back and forth, finishing each other's sentences. Their children and grandchildren listened with rapt attention, even though most of them had heard it many times before. There was something special about hearing it directly from Caleb and Olivia, something that made the story come alive. When they finished, little Emma, James's youngest daughter at 6 years old, climbed into Olivia's lap. "Grandma, what did it feel like when Grandpa asked you to dance?" Olivia thought carefully about her answer. "It felt like someone had finally seen me. Like I had been invisible and suddenly I was visible again. It felt like hope." "And what did it feel like when she said yes?" asked Emma, turning to Caleb. "It felt like the beginning of everything good in my life," Caleb said simply, which turned out to be exactly what it was. As the evening wore on and the family gradually dispersed, some to their own homes in town and others to the guest rooms upstairs, Olivia and Caleb found themselves alone again. They walked out to the porch, wrapped in shawls and jackets against the autumn chill. "I want you to know something," Caleb said suddenly, taking her hand. "If I had my life to live over, if I could go back and change anything, I would not. Every moment, every choice, every joy and every sorrow, they all led me here. To this porch with you, surrounded by the family we built together. I would not change a single thing." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "Neither would I. Even the hard parts, even the losses and the struggles, they were all part of the journey that brought us here." "To think it all started with a dance," Caleb mused. "No," Olivia corrected gently. "It started with you being brave enough to reach out to someone who looked lonely. It started with kindness." The years continued their steady march. Caleb's hair went fully white, and Olivia's hands developed arthritis that made fine sewing difficult. But they adapted, as they always had. Caleb found ways to help around the house that did not strain his aging back. Olivia took up knitting, finding it easier on her hands than detailed needlework. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, surrounded by 4 generations of family. By this time, James and Anna had 5 children, all grown now with families of their own. Beth and her husband Robert had 3 children, and Daniel and Margaret had 2. The ranch house and surrounding buildings were filled to bursting with Suttons and their various relations. At the celebration, their oldest grandchild, James's son Calvin, stood to make a toast. At 25, he looked remarkably like his grandfather had at that age, and when he spoke, there was emotion in his voice. "Grandpa Caleb and Grandma Olivia, you have shown us all what love looks like. Not the easy, romantic love of storybooks, but the real love that chooses to stay even when things are hard. The love that works through challenges. The love that builds something lasting. Every one of us here exists because you two had the courage to reach out to each other. Because you chose love over loneliness, connection over fear. We are all the beneficiaries of that choice, and we are all grateful beyond words." Olivia dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, and Caleb squeezed her hand tightly. Looking around at all the faces, at all the people who existed because she had said yes to a dance 40 years ago, was almost overwhelming. That night, lying in bed with Caleb's arms around her, Olivia thought about the young woman she had been. That lonely, grieving girl who had been convinced that happiness was not for her. If she could go back and talk to that younger self, what would she say? "I would tell her to trust," Olivia said aloud, startling Caleb, who had been drifting off to sleep. "Trust what?" he asked, his voice blurry with drowsiness. "Trust that even in the darkest moments, even when you cannot see any light at all, hope is possible. That love is possible. That one moment, one person, one choice can change everything." She turned in his arms to face him. "I would tell her that the cowboy is coming, and when he takes her hand, she should hold on tight and never let go." Caleb smiled and kissed her forehead. "I am still holding on," he said. "I will never let go." The summer of 1924 brought a heat wave to Colorado that tested everyone's endurance. Caleb, now 70 years old, found the heat particularly difficult. He moved more slowly, tired more easily. Olivia, at 67, found herself worrying about him constantly. One particularly hot afternoon in July, Caleb came in from checking on the cattle looking pale and unsteady. He collapsed into his chair in the parlor, and Olivia hurried to bring him water and a cool cloth for his forehead. When his color did not improve, she sent for Beth's husband Robert, who was still practicing medicine in Golden. Robert examined Caleb carefully and pulled Olivia aside afterward. "His heart is not as strong as it used to be," he said gently. "He needs to take it easy, no more long days in the heat. Rest, good food, and as little stress as possible." Olivia felt fear clutch at her heart. The thought of losing Caleb was unbearable. He had been her partner for 45 years, the center of her world, the person she built every day around. She could not imagine her life without him. But she pushed the fear down and focused on what needed to be done. She made Caleb rest, enlisting James and his sons to take over all the ranch work. She cooked his favorite meals and sat with him in the evenings, reading aloud from books they both enjoyed. She monitored his medicine and made sure he did not try to do more than he should. Gradually, Caleb's strength returned, though he never quite regained his previous vitality. He accepted his new limitations with grace, spending his days on the porch or in the parlor, receiving visits from his children and grandchildren, enjoying the family he had helped create. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Caleb turned to Olivia and said, "When my time comes, I want you to know that I am not afraid. I have lived a full life, a happy life. I have loved and been loved. What more could a man ask for?" "Do not talk like that," Olivia said, her voice sharp with fear. "You are going to be fine." "I am fine," Caleb assured her, "but I am also realistic. I am 70 years old, Olivia. I have had more years than many men get, and every single one of them with you has been a blessing." He took her hand. "Promise me that if I go first, you will not shut down. You will keep living, keep being part of this family we built." "I promise," Olivia whispered, though the thought of keeping that promise seemed impossible. But as it turned out, Caleb held on longer than anyone expected. He was still there for their 45th anniversary, still there to meet his first great-great-grandchild, still there to see Daniel's paintings featured in a major Denver gallery. He was frail, moving slowly, sleeping much of the day, but he was there. On a crisp October morning in 1929, Caleb woke before dawn as he always did. He watched the sunrise from their bedroom window, and then he turned to Olivia, who was still sleeping. He studied her face in the growing light, memorizing every line and curve as though he did not already know them by heart. When she woke, she found him watching her, and something in his expression made her reach for him immediately. "I love you," he said, his voice soft but clear. "I have loved you from the moment I took your hand at that dance. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "I love you too," Olivia said, fear making her voice shake. "Caleb, you are scaring me. Do not be scared, I am not." He smiled at her, that same gentle smile that had won her heart all those years ago. "I was just thinking how grateful I am. For you, for our life together, for every moment we shared. If I die right now, I die the happiest man who ever lived." "You are not dying right now," Olivia said firmly. "You are going to get up and have breakfast, and we are going to sit on the porch like we do every morning." And they did. Caleb was weak, needing help to get dressed and walk downstairs, but they made it to the porch. They sat in their usual chairs, wrapped in blankets against the morning chill, holding hands and watching the world wake up around them. "Tell me about the dance again," Caleb said suddenly. "That first night." So Olivia told him. She described standing alone, watching the couples, feeling lost and lonely. She told him about the moment when his hand took hers, how it had felt like an anchor in stormy seas. She described their first awkward dance together, the conversation over apple pie, the way her heart had started to open after being closed for so long. "That was the night my life truly began," Caleb said when she finished. "Everything before that was just waiting for you." They sat in silence for a while, and then Caleb's grip on her hand loosened. Olivia looked over to find him slumped in his chair, his eyes closed, a peaceful expression on his face. "Caleb," she said, her voice rising in panic. "Caleb," but he did not answer. Robert, who had been staying at the ranch to monitor Caleb's condition, came running at her cries. He checked for a pulse, listened for breath, and then slowly shook his head. "He is gone," Robert said gently. "His heart just gave out. It was peaceful, Olivia. He did not suffer." Olivia felt like the world had ended. The man who had been at her side for 50 years was gone. The house that had always been full of his presence now felt empty and cold. She held his hand long after he had left, unable to let go, not ready to face a world without him in it. The funeral was huge. People coming from all over Colorado to pay their respects to a man who had been a cornerstone of the Golden community. Olivia moved through the service in a daze, barely hearing the words spoken, barely aware of the hands that patted her shoulders and the voices that offered condolences. It was only later, when everyone had gone, and she was alone in the house they had shared, that the reality truly hit her. Caleb was gone. Her partner, her love, her other half, was gone, and she was alone again, just as she had been all those years ago, but not quite. Because she had children who loved her, grandchildren and great-grandchildren who needed her. She had a community that wrapped around her in her grief, bringing food and company, making sure she was never truly alone. And she had memories, 50 years of beautiful memories that no one could take away. The first year after Caleb's death was the hardest. Olivia moved through the days automatically, doing what needed to be done but feeling disconnected from everything. She spent hours on the porch, sitting in her chair and staring at the empty chair beside her, remembering. But slowly, as the seasons changed and time did its healing work, Olivia began to find her way forward. She kept the promise she had made to Caleb, staying engaged with her family, attending gatherings even when she wanted to hide, accepting invitations even when it was hard. One evening, about 18 months after Caleb's death, Olivia found herself at a church social. It was the first one she had attended since becoming a widow, and she felt awkward and uncertain, much like she had felt all those years ago when she first arrived in Golden. She stood at the edge of the room, watching couples dance, and the memory of another dance, another time, washed over her. She could almost feel Caleb's hand in hers, could almost hear him saying, "Join them." And suddenly, she understood. The joining was not just about that one dance. It was about choosing to be part of life, choosing to connect with others, choosing to step forward even when you were scared or hurting or uncertain. It was about not letting loneliness win. Olivia took a deep breath and walked into the room. She did not dance, but she sat with the other widows, listening to their stories and sharing her own. She accepted a plate of food from a well-meaning neighbor and actually tasted what she was eating for the first time in months. She laughed at a joke someone told, a genuine laugh that surprised her with its lightness. When she went home that night, she did not feel quite so alone. She was still grieving, still missing Caleb every moment of every day. But she was also still living, still part of the world, still connected to the community and the family they had built together. Olivia lived for 12 more years after Caleb's death, years that were full of both sorrow and joy. She spent them surrounded by family, watching her great-grandchildren grow, welcoming new babies into the world, celebrating anniversaries and birthdays and all the ordinary moments that made up a life. She kept the ranch, refusing all suggestions that she move to town or go live with one of her children. This was the home she had shared with Caleb, and as long as she was able, she would stay here, keeping his memory alive in the place where they had built their life together. In the evenings, she would sit on the porch and talk to him as though he were still there. She would tell him about her day, about the grandchildren and their accomplishments, about the state of the ranch and the changing world around them. And sometimes, in the wind or the bird song or the rustling of leaves, she thought she could hear him answer. On October 10th, 1941, Olivia Kendrick Sutton passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 84. She was found in her bed, a small smile on her face as though she had seen something wonderful in her dreams. The funeral was even larger than Caleb's had been, a testament to the impact one lonely seamstress had made on a small Colorado town. Her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to celebrate a life well lived, a love story that had changed the trajectory of dozens of lives. They buried her next to Caleb on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a tombstone that read simply, "Beloved wife, mother, grandmother." She joined the dance and never looked back. After the funeral, the family gathered at the ranch house. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, they stood on the porch where Olivia and Caleb had spent so many evenings together. "Tell us the story," Emma said. She was 43 now with children of her own, but she still wanted to hear it one more time. "Tell us how they met." And so the children told the story, passing it on to the next generation the way it had been passed to them. They told about the lonely seamstress and the quiet cowboy, about a hand reaching out in kindness, about a simple invitation to join the dance that became a love story spanning 50 years. They talked about how that one moment had rippled outward, affecting not just Olivia and Caleb, but everyone they touched. How their love had created a family, strengthened a community, left a legacy that would continue for generations. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared, the family stood together in silence, honoring the memory of two people who had shown them all what love could be. Not perfect or easy or without pain, but real and deep and lasting. And somewhere, in a place beyond the reach of time and grief, Olivia and Caleb were together again, dancing in an endless twilight, hand in hand, exactly where they belonged. The lonely seamstress and the kind cowboy, joined forever in the love that had begun with two simple words on a summer evening so long ago, joined them. And she had. And in joining them, she had found everything she never dared to dream was possible. Love that lasted a lifetime. A home that became a legacy. A loneliness transformed into belonging. A life well lived, surrounded by family and filled with joy. The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, each new family adding their own chapter to the story that began with Olivia and Caleb. And every generation told the story to their children, ensuring that the memory of that first dance, that first moment of connection, would never be forgotten, because it was not just their story. It was a story about courage and kindness, about reaching out when it would be easier to stay isolated, about choosing love even when fear seemed safer. It was a story that reminded people that it is never too late to take someone's hand, never too late to join the dance, never too late to find the love and connection that makes life worth living. And in Golden, Colorado, whenever couples gathered to dance, whenever someone stood alone at the edge watching others be happy, there was always someone who remembered Olivia and Caleb's story. Always someone who would reach out a hand and say those two simple words that held such power to change a life. Join them.